we're going to go ahead and get started. I know we have a couple of folks who are running a little bit behind. I think it's a pretty busy week for lots of folks. So we will just bring people into the fold as they get here. But we'll go ahead and start tonight. As a reminder, I'm Sarah Lentz. I'm chair of the board, and my pronouns are she, hers. And we have various members of the committee here and school staff as we get into this next meeting of our Boundaries Committee. So tonight our opening question is just, what is your favorite thing about spring? And you can put it into the chat. I'll read them out loud. So what is your favorite thing about spring? Longer days. Yes, yes. This light right now at 5 o'clock. Yes. Wear dresses. Working in the garden? Yes, can't wait. Those little pollinators are out there. Warmer weather, question mark. Well done, Rob. Yes. Green things, longer days, peepers. Yeah. Early flowers and pussy willows. Oh, those are all really lovely parts about spring. Well, I'm sorry that we're having to give up this spring evening for this meeting, but I think we've got some really interesting stuff to look at tonight. So we have 3 things in front of us. 1, to look at a revised boundaries map of the elementary schools, to work together on a community engagement plan that will start next month, and then also take a first look at some middle school boundaries. So that is what's on the agenda for tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to McKay if you're ready. And Superintendent Scallon, is there anything you wanted to add before we get into this set of scenarios?
No, I'm excited to dig in.
All right. Well, McKay, you can walk us through this next set of scenarios, and then we'll reflect on them as a group.
Okay, sounds great. I hope everyone received the PDFs that were sent out. I'm going to kind of look at that for a second and then kind of look at where these diverge from previous scenarios. So the feedback that we heard and the kind of trade-offs looking at your feedback. So let me share my entire screen. There. Okay. Can everyone see that screen? Okay. So you'll notice that there honestly is not a ton of change from if we remember back, the first scenario was cleaning up the boundaries so that they match the enrollment, essentially so they're more in line with the enrollment lookup, the address lookup table. And then scenario 2 was where we were looking at it, trying to modify and equalize utilization a bit with an eye on demographics. Scenario 3 was an eye prioritizing demographics, reducing the differences in all of the elementary schools, with utilization as a kind of secondary look. And then from feedback from our last meeting, what I had heard and had read in your feedback is that the utilization scenario 2 was more in line with proceeding forward as an interim step. And so this takes most of the feedback from you all was more based off of that scenario 2. The main differences here are, you can see this area of Deering Triangle would move from Talbot to Longfellow. That gives a boost of, it gives a little bit of a lift for economically disadvantaged at Longfellow percentage-wise. And then the other small modification was down here. There was some current concerns, and I'm going to switch over to my map so I can kind of zoom in. This area here, this is in row, and in scenario 2, I'm going to turn on the outline of of scenario 2, we had this area going to Reiki, but there was some question on safety and not sure if it was going to be worth providing that population to move to Reiki. So this area was moved back to Row, which it's currently at. That is something that I can push back to you all as a discussion item, but that was one of the other changes. There were some questions about this area here, which is along, I'm going to turn off my study areas, along Stevens Ave, and if some of this area could potentially go to Longfellow. We did look at that, and it did not, the feedback that I heard, and would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. I think the idea was that it would continue to provide some lift in the economically disadvantaged, the demographics to Longfellow. However, the amount of students that live specifically in this area, really the percentage is not that high. And Longfellow also went from one of the more underutilized schools to your highest utilized school in this in these scenarios so far. So it would have just added on to utilization, increase the utilization at Longfellow without providing some of that the demographic piece that I think was the point. There were some inputs about new developments in the future in this area on the point here, some over in East End. Those have been captured and included in our track layer, our housing development layer going into our forecast for this year. And just as a reminder, the numbers that we're looking at as utilization, we're really focusing on just the current. And so we will keep that in mind for future growth. And it is important to note that if there are new developments, that those should be really looked at, because if they are on a boundary, it's always better to affect potentially future students than students that live and would have to be affected now. So as we get more information, but right now we are really focused on just the current student data and not on the forecasted trends. So there was that piece. And I think there weren't a lot of comments on areas up here, except for Deering Triangle. Oh, and the other change was here. There was some question about, in scenario 2, these areas had been pulled across this really busy street that has had some danger or safety concerns in the past. And so these study areas here were moved back to Ocean Avenue. There was a question about seeing transfers, and I did want to just remind folks that there's a series of maps that you received. I believe this is a couple months ago, maybe a little bit more, because of data security or FERPA regulations. We can't really share you the actual where students are transferring from and to, but the concept, the feedback that I received was, can we get maps of transfers so that if there's a lot of students transferring into a school, why don't we consider that area for possible boundary change? And I wanted to just remind folks that these maps are essentially specifically for that. The students are aggregated, or the student points are masked a bit, so that the concept here is, if we go to, here's a really good example for, these are students that transfer into Longfellow. And so you have areas like this where there's 3 students that live right on the border of Longfellow. And in fact, the Deering Triangle move in scenario 4 helps this, right? It's not necessarily affecting students if they're already going to the school that they're going to be rezoned to anyways. So that's where these maps might be helpful. and maybe even down here as well, since these students, we've had some modifications of the area here for scenario 4. But where they are not necessarily going to help is when you have students that live, farther away from the school that they're attending. You're not going to necessarily pull out an island of 4 students and say anybody, including these 4 students and the other 10 that live in that neighborhood, are all going to be moved to Lyseth. I assume that comment was more on students that are living on these boundaries. It might be helpful. Here's a really good one for Ocean Ave, a lot of movement into Ocean Ave. And so this might be helpful on what we did with scenario 4 in this aspect, but it's not going to help, populations that live up here and go to Ocean Avenue. So wanted to remind folks of those maps. But if I turn back on so those were the main differences between scenario 2 and scenario 4. I'm going to turn back on the current attendance areas. And I think you all received the updated school locator, which is an interactive map that you can zoom in and out. Those now have the correct boundaries as they appear in your enrollment lookup table. And so that should help kind of allow you to be more interactive and zoom around.
Kay, if I can just add one piece there for folks that are not on the committee, but are watching this at home either now or at a later time. We'll update our website as well with the school locator. As I shared the link with members of this committee yesterday, but we can now put it on our website so that folks can look and also move around. So that'll go up probably next week.
Great. And that is an interactive, you can put in your address, you can zoom right into your address and it'll pop up which school you're assigned to for elementary and middle school as well. So it's helpful in that way. But so that is, for the most part, what we did. Not a ton of changes, rolling back some changes from down here that I'd like to some feedback on. There was a question about some areas right around here, north of Reiki, that this whole area was assigned to Reiki, and essentially why move some of these areas, or could Reiki take back in some of these areas between these areas and this area? And there is a trade-off with the percentages of economically disadvantaged that was more helpful to Reiki to look at these boundaries rather than a trade-off. It helped.
Could I follow up on that, because that was one of my little sticky notes, yeah. And I've actually gotten a lot of feedback from families at Reiki about this. So the thought process was, could we take people around Valley Street and St. John and send them to either Row or Longfellow, and then take back Grant Street, because that part is part of the Parkside neighborhood, and it's whereas that Valley and State Street, it's actually kind of a bit of an island anyways, that doesn't really naturally belong to any areas, because you actually can't walk up that green area very well, because it's heavily wooded and there's like a path. I'm talking about over by Valley Street. But we were wondering, are there actually that many kids over there anyways?
And just so that I'm clear, and this is just Valley Street, is that this block that you were talking about?
No, it's in the Reiki area. Go left. No, okay, you see the green park area in the Reiki area?
Yes.
Yeah, that's Valley Street and St. John Street.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Let me pull this over.
Because nobody has actually like sought me out to provide feedback, and I've had several families who had lots of questions about Grant Street being sectioned off.
I see we've got some other hands popping up. Let's go to Bill, and then we'll go to Priscilla and then Damon. So go ahead, Bill. Oh, I can't hear you, though. Okay, we're going to go to Priscilla, and we'll circle back. Go ahead, Priscilla.
Okay. So yeah, I have one concern that I noticed, and on this scenario, but then I think on the other scenarios were also like this, but I didn't notice, is on Grant Street. So Grant Street is a street that has a lot of our low-income families that needs a lot of after school activities, and they have to pick up their kids after school. So my concern is on them not being going to Reiki anymore. That is a walking distance to Reiki, so they can have access to their kids after school, or to and go to Ocean Ave in cases like this. I think this is going to be a challenge. And not only that, it is a street that has a lot of apartment that has like 3 bedrooms apartments. So that has a lot of pre-K students. And it's nice to have pre-K students attending the same schools as their siblings. And Ocean Ave does not have a pre-K program. So I think it's just something to think about it, but it's not like a huge challenge, but it's just something that I was thinking about, that it may be a challenge when it comes to hearing from the community. That's something that's probably going to come up. And Valley Street, I think I missed the information that you were saying about Valley Street. Are we changing? Is that going to still be at Reiki?
It's currently still at Reiki, Priscilla, but I was advocating that maybe instead of getting rid of that half of Parkside, the Grant Street area that you're talking about, and sending it to Ocean Ave, that we keep them, and then in exchange send Valley Street and St. John Street to Row or Longfellow.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Valley Street, I would totally support and advocate as well. But this year we were able to add transportation from Valley Street to Reiki, which is a huge plus because of safety concerns. We didn't have it before. That issue was addressed. Because kids were walking from Valley Street, so that was an issue.
And sorry, Priscilla, just to add a question, do a lot of families on Grant Street walk? Because I live one block from there, and I've noticed like most kids on my street take the bus.
From Grant Street, they have bus, but they can walk to after school programs. That's what I mean.
Okay.
So if they're going to Ocean and they're part of like after school activities, they're not going to be able to pick up their kids because they don't have cars. So that would be a challenge, and they're going to need access to different opportunities for after school activities other than what it's offered at schools, which it has been a challenge because there's not a lot of opportunities. So that's what's good about Reiki right there, because families are being able to just walk from Grant Street to Reiki. And the families that are living at Grant Street are families that are not eligible for any supports. So they must pay for their expenses and everything. So they don't have any other options.
Thanks, Priscilla. Bill, go ahead.
How about now? Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. Priscilla makes some good points about the kids on Grant Street, having them access. I know that she's talking about after school programs, but even the immediate access to the school itself, to shuffle those kids all the way across town to Ocean Ave would be a challenge. Also, Valley Street has one whole bus worth of kids just at Valley and C. So I drive to Reiki to pick up 30 kids to go just to Valley and C. So I don't think it would make sense to shuffle the Valley kids, because there's also a stop at Valley and Park. But to have those kids, I think making the railroad there would also make a natural barrier. But there's a ton of kids that live along Valley Street.
So Bill, just for my clarification, you're saying that, so I just kind of picked out the area that I'm thinking Valley Street is. It would be difficult if these students went to Row, or is that what you were saying? Or were you saying that they would be better served going to Reiki?
I think they'd be a lot better served going to Reiki. It's okay. Much closer. And I mean, as far as someone mentioned something about not knowing if there's many families or kids that live over there, but there's a ton. I mean, down by the lower end by the Western or Danforth Street, it's all industrial and a giant cliff. But when we move the stop from Valley and A to Valley and C, and then there's also a stop at Valley and Park. And that's like a whole bus worth of kids.
I guess my question is, if they are getting on the bus anyways from Valley and St. John Street, what's the difference between busing kids to Row versus Reiki, or Longfellow versus Reiki, since they're already getting on a bus?
They don't all take the bus. Certainly, if they all took the bus, it'd be a bigger busing issue. But
do you know what percentage take the bus? Because I mean, basically, so my kid goes to Reiki, and like people I've been talking to in the community say that most people over there take the bus, and that was what Priscilla was just saying too. That the bus started there for safety reasons.
Yeah, that's also an area that we're looking at right now, because I actually think we're busing too many students in the Reiki area while also paying for crossing guards. So we're studying that and trying to figure out if we've got the right balance right now. There may be some of the students in I'm not talking about a particular street, but in the general vicinity that don't necessarily need to be on a bus.
Yeah, because something like, what is it, like 80% of our students are taking the bus, but it's actually one of the smallest districts or catchment areas.
Yeah, I don't know what the percentage is, but we are busing a lot because a big area was sort of at some stage marked off as a hazard zone. And we're trying to re-examine that to see if it actually makes sense still.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that feedback. Damon, go ahead.
Yeah, just to kind of synthesize from that, I advocate for, to the greatest extent we can, trying to create boundaries that are walkable. So I think if there's a potential for getting more kids in the Reiki district to walk, we should try to set it up to do that. So I see that if they adjusted the study areas a bit back to where they were, I think that's a good change there. I think if we did grab any additional areas from the Reiki district and move them potentially into Longfellow or Grove, the St. John Valley area does make more sense in that it's, I've talked to people who live in that neighborhood quite a bit about kind of how it really does feel like a distinct area because of the grade change. It's pretty steep hill there. And so, I mean, maybe that could be considered, but and if we did, I'd say it might make more sense to send those kids to Longfellow, because I would guess, I'd like to see the numbers, but I would guess that would help with the PD disparity. I think, really overall, I like this scenario. I think we should get some feedback from some of the other areas that are proposed to be changed. But I like that it preserves a lot of the walkability of the districts, and I think that's a good goal. So, yeah, I'd like to see. I wouldn't mind seeing the numbers here of what you just put in, but I don't know if there's other reasons not to do it, then we should do it.
Thanks, Damon. McKay, do you have a sense of what that change was that you just made? How it?
Yeah, it definitely pushes. So in the blocks that I pulled, and please forgive me if I'm not pulling the right blocks, but this is what I was hearing. These 6 blocks have about 50 students. They are predominantly in the percentages of economically disadvantaged, and so that would increase Longfellow in it would help out Reiki a little bit, not a ton. In the demographics piece, it would definitely help out Longfellow. However, the negatives or challenges surrounding this would be that Longfellow went up to 87.6%, and would bring Reiki down to 66.6%. But I think the bigger thing would be that's a lot of students for Longfellow to take on, considering that they've taken on, in this scenario, they've taken on this whole area and the Deering Triangle. And so that would be a lot. It would be going from the least utilized to the most utilized. So it just depends on how you all feel about that.
And what was the capacity before you made that change? Priscilla, I'll come right to you. What was the capacity before you made that change of Longfellow?
The capacity at Longfellow in, let me just,
or the utilization, yeah.
Really quick, let me just change it back to Reiki. So with that change, it puts it up to 87. With it going back to Reiki, it would be at, Longfellow would be at 76. And
Longfellow would be at 76.
Correct.
At 75.
So right.
Okay.
It changes it to like 86 and 66 instead of 76 and 75.
Priscilla, what were you going to add there?
Sorry, I just said that I think it's too much for Longfellow. I think it's a huge change for a school that it's being underutilized to be like overutilized like that. You know, I think it would be too much.
Could we split it up?
Thank you for that feedback.
So these 1, 2, 3, 4, that is predominantly where we have the students living, 46 students. Another concept would be reaching down here, but I don't know if that gets into the Grant Street piece that we're trying to avoid. If you just took these 2 top, let's see, 16 students.
I think if you just did that, that wouldn't be as problematic, I think, to the Parkside neighborhood.
Well, I'll caution, I don't know if splitting up the St. John Valley neighborhood is something you should do unless there's a really compelling reason. And I do think that the changes that have already been kind of advanced for Longfellow might be kind of enough. Although, maybe there's a way to make some other changes that don't hit the utilization quite as high. But I think we really kind of all liked the idea of the Deering Triangle going in. So then that brings up, maybe there's a few blocks on the southeastern side here that don't go in with the trade-off. But I do like the idea of keeping the St. John Valley neighborhood together if we can.
I agree. And I had a question about the Deering Triangle piece, like west of Stevens. Like, how big is that city? Or like, how many kids is that? I mean, it's half of it's cemetery, but.
Is this the area that you're
west of? Yeah. So keep leaving the triangle in the actual triangle that's there as part of Longfellow, but this other like squarish block, like how many kids is that? Yeah.
Okay. there's only one student there.
I assumed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What other questions do people have about this, or comments, kind of like initial observations? Yeah, go ahead, Ariel.
I mostly put these on sticky notes on the Miro board, I think, but my primary sort of thing that I was noticing, and I just want to note that I'm not great at geography in general, and like pinpointing specific neighborhoods in the city the way others are doing. That feedback is so useful and not a way that my brain works particularly well. So I'm kind of looking at like bigger picture trends in this scenario. But I was curious, Ocean Ave, at least the way the scenario was when it was sent to us, seemed to have the most change pretty much. And I was curious if Priscilla and others had thoughts about how well Ocean Ave would be equipped, or what it might need to be equipped for having both significantly more students and significantly increased percentage of economically disadvantaged students.
And Ariel, I think that this kind of feedback is really helpful. That's why we have this committee, so everybody can bring in that different lens. But yeah, I'd love to hear kind of, and Dr. Warren might have something to say about that, or any other staff we have on the call.
I don't have anything to.
So I'm just trying to understand the question. The question was about Ocean Ave, how affected it would be. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Sorry to put you on the spot, Priscilla.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
But I think McKay is pulling up what I was talking about in scenario 4. Ocean Ave goes from utilization of 60.8% to 70.3%, which is a pretty big jump. And it goes from percent economically disadvantaged 37.5% to 53.2%. So it's got an increase of 15.7% of economically diverse students, which is by far, I mean, if you look down that rightmost column in terms of percent ED change, Ocean Ave really jumps out. So I was curious if you had any thoughts about, is Ocean Ave currently in a good spot to have big changes like that, or what kinds of things off the top of your head might they need to be prepared?
Yeah, I mean, those numbers, to be very honest with you, is really interesting to me because it doesn't reflect the reality that I face on a day-to-day, because Ocean Ave is one of the schools that has the most amount of students that are McKinney-Vento, for example. So there are low-income families. So that's the school that I work the most, and they are so ready, and they have a huge team to support our students. So that number, based on my work, that number doesn't represent the reality. So I was shocked to see that number, to be very honest. I would think that number would be higher already than what is showing there.
And I'm just going to lean in here because this is a super important distinction. And the work that you're doing right now is looking at boundaries with residence-based students. This is not enrollment. And so these numbers, if you can remember back like 2 or 3 months ago, we had a couple of maps that looked at, this is what you can solve with policy, this is what you can solve with boundaries, right? And so you have a lot of movement because of services that you provide within your district, which is great. But the look that we are looking at is if your policies were enforced at these residence-based pieces. And so from Priscilla's perspective, and forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but that is not surprising to me that these numbers look so different. because I think what the hope would be is that at least that your boundaries perhaps might be getting more in line with where you might be, sending students in your policy. And
Yes.
so I don't know if that is a one-to-one, but that's what I'm hearing there is like, yes, this looks like a really large change, but maybe the boundaries are becoming more in line as you're having this part of your process is looking at demographics, why it might not feel different when you go into the schools, because when you go into the schools, you're not seeing necessarily the students that live there, you're seeing the students that go there.
Exactly. And the new boundaries does reflect that change. So especially like on Chestnut Street, that is going out to Ocean. Yeah, but to the other question, I do think that Ocean Ave is ready.
That's really good to hear. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
One thing I just wanted to point out too is that we just changed the boundaries a little bit from what's reflected in the PDF. So the numbers would be a little bit different with some of the Parkside neighborhood going back to Reiki. The other thing I think we should bear in mind too is that economically disadvantaged students are along the spectrum. So some that might just come in. I mean, it's a number on a page, and the reality is that there's a whole spectrum of incomes, and people are coming from different places. So it might not be a binary thing as much as something that exists along the spectrum. So I'm sure, kind of think of it that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good reminder. Yeah,
just to follow up on that really quick, that's a really great point, and I just wanted to mention that Ocean Ave in scenario 4 is at 53.2% economically disadvantaged. And with these blocks moving back to Reiki, it does bring Reiki back up to 75.8. They are currently at 75.8. And so it doesn't make a ton of change for Reiki. It does pull down Ocean Ave a little bit to 42.2 from scenario 4.
Yeah, and that's why it's important, I think, to find another pocket of students that might make sense to send to another area, because I think that staff is really burnt out from high needs population at Reiki right now. And so it just doesn't feel fair to anyone to have a lot of our high needs students concentrated at East End and Reiki.
Yeah, I was also just curious if there's any other moves that we could make to decrease that disproportionality.
Yeah,
between.
And I'd put in the chat maybe
how about Valley Street to Row.
So Priscilla just said Valley Street to Row, and then Annie, what was your last?
I put it in the chat. I was just saying east of High Street and north of Cumberland Ave, because those are going to Ocean maybe, because they're very busy streets to cross, so it's not great walking anyways.
Okay.
I wanted to take that first piece, and what I popped on here, and these students are aggregated, but these are aggregated K-5 students that are also as economically disadvantaged in the student information system. And so you can kind of see where the pockets are. When you talk about, there's no real pockets that are not within walking distance from what I've heard here, except for the Valley Street, but we can investigate your next concept. I just wanted to show what the Valley Street to Row would look like. That would put Row at 81.4%. And I think, 81.4% is not super high, it is some distance, right? And so that's just something to keep in mind. And then for the economically disadvantaged, that pushes Roe up to 47.6. They are currently at 43.0. So it does help that out a little bit for Reiki. However, because Reiki has such a high percentage to begin with, when you move small amounts of students, it's just not going to do as much. So it goes from 75.8% to 74%. So in the right direction, but not a huge, there's not a lot of options, honestly, for Reiki unless you take a large amount of students that are within walkable distance and bus them. And so that comes to the guiding principles of how do you best serve that population. Another way to serve that population is to maybe find, closer schools so that you just reduce the utilization a bit, but or policy.
Sorry, do you mind just checking the area that I'm wondering if maybe those two areas. So the other one is so it's east of High Street. So that's west. You want to go east.
East of High Street. Okay, over here.
No, keep going. Yeah.
Oh, keep going.
It's on the other side of Reiki, close to Ocean.
Gotcha. In here or?
No, close to other side of Reiki, the other side of the catchment area.
I'm not.
You're looking. Move this. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. So if anybody else wants to help out with directions.
Could you use any other street names, Annie?
Yeah. So north of Cumberland. Go more towards the East End school area. It abuts the East End school area. Okay, there we go. We're getting closer there. Okay, so you see High Street is kind of in the middle of the screen there.
Scroll down where it's at, yeah.
And then Cumberland is stay right where you are. Cumberland is also right where you see Maine. That's Oh, and so it looks like a lot of this is already assigned to Ocean.
Yeah, the area north of Cumberland and east of Forest Ave is currently in Ocean Ave, and
there is that one section, and I think maybe an argument could be made north of Congress, which is just one street over from Cumberland, because Congress is also not a fun street to cross.
Is Congress 26?
Yes.
Okay. So these study areas are east of High, south of Cumberland, north of Congress.
Yeah. And then there's one other spot, right? That is north of Cumberland and east of High. That's right next to the pink that wasn't included in sent to Ocean.
Say that one more time. Are you talking about this highlighted piece here?
Nope. If you move your cursor over to the left and up at the top of the screen. Yeah, right there.
Right here.
Uh-huh. I don't see your cursor anymore. Yeah, I think you got it.
So that was one of the when earlier in the conversation, when you were talking about Grant, I went ahead and pulled that one as well.
Gotcha.
And put it back to Reiki.
I think that, and I'm open to other people's views, but I think that that far right one would be okay to send to Ocean because High Street is such a busy street to cross.
To other folks, and Ariel, I'm coming to you next, but let's get this variation.
Do you want me to look at that with the row change too, or do you want me to take
That'd
Valley?
be great if you don't mind.
Yeah. So with these 3 blocks, 2 Reiki, these 6 to row, and this 1 block to Ocean Ave, you would be looking at.
I can't imagine that it changes it that much for Reiki.
For Reiki, compared to, so for Reiki, they're currently sitting at 75.3%. Again, this is all residence based, 75.3%. Scenario 4 took that down to 61.7%. And this scenario would have them at 63%. Row would be currently at 73.3%. Scenario 4 did not change that. This would bring them up to 81.4%. And Ocean Ave would change from, they're currently at 60.8%. Scenario 4 put them up to 70.3%. And Ocean Ave, because of the loss of these blocks here, pushes them down to 58.6%. So there might be other, if this is a direction that you wanted to go, there might be other areas that Ocean Ave could potentially pick up. For the attributes for economically disadvantaged, Ocean Ave would be at 46.4%. They are at 53.2% with the scenario 4. Reiki would be at 72.5%, which is the same as they are with scenario 4. And row would go up to 47.6% from 43% current and scenario 4.
Okay, that's super helpful. Damon, and then let's get any last suggestions for next round of edits on this scenario. But go ahead, Damon.
Okay, 2 quick things. One, I guess with row, I think if moving the St. John Valley neighborhood to row sounds okay. But just one thing to caution is we do have some significant size developments happening in the row district at Doherty Field and Thompson Point, which may be adding students. So I would hate to see us change the boundaries and then have to do it again in relatively short order as that development comes online. So I just want to make sure that's being accounted for. So it might make more sense to send that area to Longfellow after all, if we make another couple switches maybe. The other thing is, we didn't talk about this yet, but there is an area between Presumpscot and Lysith that's proposed to be changed. And I was looking at that and heard from some people who have been looking at this and were wondering why that might be the case, and just kind of thinking about those 3 study areas there are pretty walkable to Lysith, and there's a bike trail network, so it's easy to bike or walk to school from there. And if we move it to Presumpscot, maybe it wouldn't be. So we wanted to see if that is what we really want to do and if it's justified. And if it is, okay, great. But if there's if it's not going to improve things all that much and it makes those areas less bikeable and walkable to school, then maybe we should reconsider that one.
That's great feedback. So I wanted to talk about those areas, and I believe these are the areas that you're talking about right here between Presumpscot and Lysith. And from a geographic perspective, with Presumpscot, and maybe this is with Ocean Ave taking on these pieces here from Presumpscot, from just a nearness piece and losing some of their attendance area to Longfellow. This area was moved from Presumpscot to Ocean Ave, which reduced Presumpscot's utilization. And so the idea there was to take some from Lyseth. However, you don't have any huge, I might have said this before, but your challenge statement on utilization is, if anything, some underutilized, maybe. But the main thing was Lyseth was the highest utilized. And so the idea here was just to get that down a little bit, potentially raise Lyseth's economically disadvantaged percentages. So that's what that was about, is taking some from Lyseth to reduce there. But it is not a huge change, and there's not a lot of development that we found up to the north. So it's not like Lyseth is going to be over capacity. So in my eyes, I'm making that assumption, not having run the forecast yet, but don't see any huge issues with moving these back to Lyseth.
So I think we'd want to look at that. And then Ariel, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out, McKay, if you don't mind going south again on the map a little bit, to sort of where we were talking about on the border of Rowe and Reiki. I know everything we do. Thank you. I know everything we do has trade-offs, and I definitely hear what Annie is saying about Reiki needing some relief in terms of the resources they have and the demands that they have as well. I just want to quickly note that one of the things that we talked about in our various balancing priorities was kind of wanting to have neighborhood schools. And I just want us to keep in mind that Rowe's parcel is really weird and large. And though, you know, at that end, you're real far away from your school if you go to Rowe. You're certainly not walking there, and it maybe impacts like what you can do after school and, you know, getting to parent teacher conferences and all sorts of things. It doesn't make a huge difference, because even with the boundaries the way they are now, that edge of Rowe's catchment area is still quite far away from the school. But I just thought it was worth mentioning if we're talking about further expanding that boundary.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ariel. I think that's a good thing to note. And then I just had one question. McKay, I know that we're talking about like current enrollment, but there's also going to be a potentially a new housing development where the Barron Center is right now, which is off of 25 here, which is firmly in Rowe's district. That would be prioritizing immigrant housing. And so I know that we're not take this into consideration so that we aren't, just like having, like Damon said, like having to just redo this in a year or two after these developments are complete.
Yes, so that would be with the tracks all integrated and the forecast produced. We can look at how many students we assume based on where students live and in what type of housing they live in now. That's where we take the student yield factors and apply those to the future. And we have not yet, we are in the midst of finalizing our track layer, but that track, the housing development will be included in that. And again, if there is, I always say in any boundary review, if there's if it is potentially near another boundary, that you should really look at making that potential change before things are finalized, because it's much better to affect future students and set up expectations for them than to affect current students affect current students for future students. And so it makes more sense to establish students that are moving into a new school rather than moving students to a new school.
Great. Okay. That's helpful. So it sounds like we've got a couple of suggestions for you to look at for the next revision. And I'm going to go ahead and move us into thinking about what community engagement could look like and what our timeline looks like getting into that. So we had tentatively said that community engagement would start in the month of May. And I think our goal would be to have a working set of scenarios that we would bring to the community to then get even more feedback on, that then we would come back together as a committee and update them based on community feedback. So our goal is not to get to a final before we start doing that, but to get to a solid and we can get feedback on from the community. And I put together just a proposal of what I think a plan could look like for our community engagement. And I'm going to share that with you. And this is just based on kind of some of the other processes that we've had in the past. So, the superintendent search, the strategic plan process. So this is on the Miro board. I'll zoom out a little bit so people can get oriented. But these are the suggestions I would like to make, and then we can get some feedback on them. So creating a web page that would live on our website that would have information on the boundary proposals. So community could go there to look at the maps and to understand our process and for just to get more information. And then that there would also on that web page and could be distributed a survey to families so they could give feedback. Then I would suggest that over the course of the month of May and into the first part of June is that we could ask PTOs to host sessions at each of the elementary schools, minus Peaks and Cliff, and each middle school. Host a multilingual family event with intentional outreach to the Portland Adult Ed, because we have so many parents that take classes there, to make sure that they get invited to the session, and then to do 2 virtual events that would be open to all on Zoom, where we could do whatever presentation and then get people some feedback there. So this is a lot of touch points. So if you, down here, I've kind of listed these. So we're talking a decent amount of meetings with the community, but I do think it's important to go to schools and meet people at their schools. So I think that this will take a lot of work, but is worth it. But I'm curious if you think there are other ways of getting feedback from the community. Ariel, go ahead.
I think that it's really important, and I think we should at least this much. I'm sold on the amount of effort. And I just wanted to throw out a couple of other ideas. One is I've been curious since the beginning to see if we could specifically get feedback from the families who already send their kids to a school that they're not zoned for. Because we can get some input, first of all, on how inconvenient they feel it is to have to transport their kid or whatever because we have sort of taken it as a principle through this process that we really want kids to be able to go to their closest school. But obviously there are sometimes reasons why it feels worth it not to. And so kind of trying to understand that might be good, because I think we're probably anticipating a fair amount of resistance if we do try to send kids, kind of further away from where they live. But maybe this will help us understand what pockets of support there might be for that and why. And I also think that there should, if possible, be special outreach to the families, the students and the families who already participate in one of the specialized programs, like the Breathe program and the other, like for kids with disabilities. And I know you mentioned specifically multilingual, and I just want to make sure that we also loop in the programs that only exist at certain schools within the district.
Great points. I think that could be definitely added. Other thoughts?
I think that sounds great. So did you say we would be doing this outreach before the end of this school year?
Yes.
I think that would be good before everyone gets out for the summer. And then that'll give us time to process the input. And would we be kind of sharing out, like, say, for example, a modified scenario 4 for the discussion? Okay.
Yes.
I think that would.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That's what I'm thinking, and that scenario could also be embedded on the webpage that we create, so people can see it there, along with the middle school scenario when we get to a good working draft of that. Okay, so if you have other thoughts about community outreach or engagement, please let me know. And then below here, if folks wanted to just take I will work with the outreach and community engagement team to start to schedule these and the PTOs. But if you're interested in being in any particular meeting, it would be great if you wanted to add your name on here, and then we can coordinate with you as we start to schedule them. We often, as we go into schools and hold meetings there, we work on the school schedule. So we work around whatever else is happening in the school. So we'll do our best. But I think if you double click on any of these cells, you can enter your name here.
Very stupid question that I should know the answer to, but when would these potential changes go into effect?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's something that we have to figure out within our recommendations. So we haven't even started to talk about, like, do we just do a flat start with all of these changes and recommend that to the board? Do we do something tiered where it's like people that are starting school follow the new boundaries versus everybody that lives there right now? So I think that in an ideal world, we would be able to get board approval by the end of the summer and start this year, assuming that we could get transportation and everything in line. But I think I don't know. Superintendent Scallon, I'm going to ask you to join in on this for a second too, if you feel like it's realistic. I don't want to overpromise.
Yeah, for this coming year, I think it's really probably very too fast. Just as I think about class size, moving teachers, etc., that depending on what the changes are, there may be some small things we could do for like families who would be impacted to have a choice about where they start, or like that kind of thing for like kindergarten. Yeah. I don't know, but otherwise I think it'd be really too hard. And so we're really talking about a 26, 27 in my mind.
Beautiful. I knew there was a reason I brought you into the conversation. Yeah, no, that's great. Let's see.
Sarah.
Yes.
I can't put my name in there because I am in the car still, but I'm certainly able to help with to be part of any meetings, especially like the multilingual families. I can do that, or Beautiful. Any other schools that it's left. You can just put my name down.
Awesome. That is great. And I'm realizing I had row on there twice, but yeah, so folks want to continue to fill it out. I'm guessing maybe folks are having a hard time getting their names in. And if that's the case, you can just put it in the chat and I will move it, write you in there. I'll follow up with a spreadsheet afterwards. Oh, look at people are using Post-its to put it in there to work around. Good job, everyone. Oh, I'm so proud of everyone. And then I just wanted to, so folks can keep working on that down there and putting it in the chat. But if you want to pop up just a second to this slide here, designing a web page. Annie found this great example that I would love for people to look at here. And just to see if there's anything that we, could take from this to put on our web page. So it has like this, why is this happening paragraph, which I think is great. When will this change happen? What we're asking folks to do on the web page. I also envision just having like the history of this committee and the recordings being linked there so people can watch. But then it gives like a rating system and all kinds of things. I'm not sure we could pull off something this complicated, but I just wanted to give you this as a model that we might be able to use.
And I just wanted to say the team that built this, which is at Northeastern, the professor was super excited about the potential of us using any of his tools. So I think that they would be happy to help give us feedback on what types of information have resonated for other communities.
Awesome. Thanks, Annie. Any thoughts about what we should make sure to have on our webpage? And Priscilla, I see your hand is up. Was that from before or a new question?
Okay. Sorry about that. It was
That's okay. That's okay. Anything people think of that they would want to make sure is on that webpage of your family or parent going there to get more information? What would be important to you?
I think the question that I keep getting from folks, again, is just the timeline of it. And so maybe just saying like, we are uncertain, but here are some ideas.
Beautiful. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I think the information on the template that was shared is great. So. Okay.
Great. Well, if anybody thinks of anything at any time, and we can always add it as well. You can add it onto this. Now, yeah.
Sorry. One question that has come up to me quite a few times already is for those parents that the kids attend an early start school, and based on the new boundaries, they would probably be going to a late start school. If the school would be offering early schools program for those kids to attend, so they could continue their work. But I know that becomes another challenge, and I wasn't able to respond, but that has been some of the concerns that was brought it up.
Yeah, I'm going to note that as a pretty big question that we need to figure out. I don't think we have an answer to it right now. And I think it also depends if we're able to stagger when people start making this change also. But I think, and depending also what happens in transportation. So I'm going to note that.
Sarah, is there also I heard a rumor, I don't know, that they would eventually switch, like lates would become earlys, those would become starts. Is that still on the table?
So when the early and late was implemented, that was the original idea. But then a lot of things have just happened that have made that impractical, COVID being one of them. And we just, to undo it and redo it, it's an onion of work. There's just so many layers. I think our goal would be to get to equal start times at each tier of our schools so that we don't have half of our elementary schools having to pay for rec when others don't. And, we do hear from about 50% of parents that the schedule that they're on right now doesn't work. And then we hear from 50% of the parents that the schedule they're on does work. And so I think it would be awesome if we could find one start time, but that is very transportation dependent. And right now we just don't have enough buses and bus drivers to make it work. So that is a very complicated answer to what should be a simple question, but it's more to come on that. It is in the strategic plan, though, to really look at that, especially as it relates to transportation. Grace, go ahead.
Just want to understand the timeline, Sarah. So the board is going to get this before this end of the school year. That's why the aggressive timeline for public input for May. Is that the reason?
So the board will get it in the end of the summer.
End of the summer.
Yeah. So the goal is, and I'm glad you're asking this because I'm not sure that we've really said it out loud enough. So the goal is to get working scenarios that we could take to the public in May and June, and that this committee could meet several times over the summer to finalize recommendations for the board. And so the board can have it by the end of the summer, or early fall.
I was just raising that because it's hard to get families in May and June, given all of the activities that we have during the school year, graduation, and all kinds of other events. That's
yeah. I feel that as a family member myself, and it's also possible that maybe we could overlap with some of those events that are already happening. So maybe we could think about that, Grace, as well.
Yep.
Beautiful. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes. I would love us to take a first look. We probably won't have a ton of time to give feedback on it, but a first look at a scenario for middle schools. So McKay, I'm going to stop sharing so you can take it over.
Yes, and I wanted to mention, I don't know, a really helpful piece on the website will be, are you looking at elementary or middle or both? Just so that folks are really clear who potentially
should be giving feedback. Yep.
Could be affected. Let me share this. Okay. Am I sharing? Yes. Okay. I just wanted to talk through really quickly where your current splits are, and just to remind folks of what a split is that's when an entire an elementary school boundary is split between two middle schools, right? And so you have some very strange splits already. And so I wanted to kind of walk through, these are your middle school boundaries as they are with the enrollment lookup table. The island schools are all assigned to King Middle School. The blue is King, the orange is Moore, and the green is Lincoln. The current breakdown of utilization is 71.7 for King, 60.5 for Lincoln, and 59.7 for Moore. And then they're a little bit funky because of, I believe, because of bus routes, and you kind of see these little snippets that kind of Moore pulls down into King. I don't think that there's a lot of students that live in these orange pieces, but you can see that also Moore pulls down across the bridge here. So as we overlay this with your current elementary school boundaries, I wanted to show you what a split looks like. And so here's a really great one that I think has come up in this meeting with Deering Triangle being split. So currently everyone that lives within this black outline goes to Talbot Elementary School, including this little island here. So these students all in here go to Talbot. But when it comes to middle school, they're split, and these smaller communities that have been together from K through 5 are then now split from their cohort. Most of Talbot attends Lincoln or is assigned to Lincoln, and just a small piece are assigned to Moore. So those are areas, and you can see there's some of these just very small splits that most likely these students are applying to go to the other middle school that they've the students that they've been with for K through 5 instead of breaking off. The larger split is in Rowe, which you have the southern portion of the Rowe Elementary, those students going to King, with the northern portion going to Lincoln. And then you have a large split within Ocean Ave, actually split 3 ways to going to the north, some in the south going to King, and this little snippet on the other side of the busy road going to Lincoln. And then you have a large split in East End between King and Moore. Your only 2 straight feeders, meaning they all go from K through 5 and they all go into 6 through 8, are at Lyseth and Presumpscot. There's even a small block here that's technically in Reiki that is assigned to Ocean Avenue. So a lot of splits currently. And so the concept is to look at what this would look like with an understanding of where we were in scenario 4. Of course, this new scenario would change that. But let you take a look at this scenario 1. The scenario 1 prioritized both economically disadvantaged mechanisms here. And let me just go back to the current, because I didn't have a chance to go through the demographics. For the demographics, you have the highest percentage of economically disadvantaged at King. And then both Lincoln and Moore are lower at 51.5% and 46.4% at Lincoln and Moore, respectively. So looking at this scenario 1 has a lot of impact. It is looking at reducing that difference in economically disadvantaged, and it prioritizes keeping clean feeders, meaning the whole elementary goes to the whole middle school. So you can kind of see here, this is a bit confusing. I'm going to just turn off the existing middle school boundaries. The color block is what the scenario is. And so anything in hatch would be an area that would essentially change. So it is a lot of change. But you've got, essentially, it takes you down to 2 splits. It would be, Row would be split, and Ocean Ave would be completely going to King. But then you'd have this split in Longfellow. All of East End would go to the north, to Moore. And so you'd have these straight feeders that would result in King being at 67.7%, Lincoln being at 64%, and Moore being at 60.3%. Your attributes would be at, that would bring King down to 62.9% for economically disadvantaged Lincoln, and Moore would be very even at 52 and 54%. And then, because that is so much change, we wanted to look at impacting a little bit less with an eye on reducing the splits at elementary, with still keeping these other pieces in mind. So this is looking at a lot less impact, some impact here, and impact up here. And this is mainly to get those to be the clean feeders. And a small impact here that I don't even think affects any students. I think this just kind of cleans up that boundary. But with the least change to middle school, that would result in King at 61 point, this is utilization, 61.1%, Lincoln at 64.8%, and Moore at 65.1%. And economically disadvantaged would be still higher at King, 67.5%, but reduced. And then Lincoln and Moore would still be almost exactly the same at 52%. So there's a little highlight of these two takes on what this would look like in accordance with scenario 4. And again, as we go on to other scenarios, these would also need to potentially change to try to avoid the biggest thing with the feeder piece is trying to avoid smaller communities being essentially isolated from their K-5 cohort and pushed into a new middle school by themselves.
Ariel, go ahead. What question do you have?
Thanks so much, McKay. This is a ton of work and obviously way too much to process in a short amount of time. But I just want this. I'm sure this is obvious, but if these could be sent out to look at, that would be great because. Just my initial questions are, how does this strike the transportation and logistics folks? And I see Sarah Warren has her hand up, maybe for that piece. And then also, obviously, curious what Aris thinks. But I know we don't have a ton of time to get into all of this, and we are a chatty committee.
No, that's really great. And the goal tonight was just to look at this, and then you'll get these versions are now in the Google Drive, and we'll start with reflection in the next meeting on these maps. Dr. Warren, go ahead.
I wasn't actually going to comment on transportation. I probably tend to underestimate the impact, so I would want Bill Lamb to speak up because he has to actually drive the routes every day. But, my attitude is often we'll figure it out. But no doubt there are some things that are harder than others. So yes, we would want to look at that ultimately. For me, the question was whether this particular map, and I hear you now that it's aligning to scenario 4, but I'm just wondering if it takes into account the new developments that are coming in. Do we have a sense of how that would affect middle school?
We don't have that integrated because we haven't run the new forecast. I can look back at what we had for the forecast for base year 2023. I'm just not sure if that's going to be a very good indication, but I can definitely look back at that. We will have those numbers soon. I am hoping by end of May, we have updated forecast and can start taking some of these scenarios and looking at it with the integrated, where you can actually see it on the screen, and we can look out at 2034 and be like, oof, that's not going to work. So let's make some modifications now.
Okay. Yeah. It sounds like we will have a lot of work over the summer to do, which is, I think, okay. I think we're giving ourselves a really good foundation to move into the summer with all the information that we need to make some really good recommendations. Dr. Scallon, I just want to double check that you added those into the folder. Oh, great. Thanks, Rob. I will add that onto the spreadsheet here.
Yes,
so,
you should.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry that you're asking. You should be able to see them. They're also on board docs. But if you can't see them, shoot me a message and we'll get it.
Awesome. So for our next meeting, we'll be looking at hopefully what could be the last draft of scenario 4 for elementary schools to get it to a final place for community engagement. And we'll be digging into this middle school map, and should also have hopefully dates and times for a lot of the community engagement sessions. So we are rocking and rolling. Good work tonight, everyone. I really appreciate appreciate the ways you're showing up and digging into this material. So any last questions about what's coming next or what to expect? Awesome. Well, we will be in touch by email and reach out with any questions. Next meeting is May 1st. So we will see you then. Take good care until then.